Greetings, dear viewers. Welcome to Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Shifarao Lako, and thank you for being with us. The Minister of Defense expresses confidence that the Ethiopian army is currently in a good shape to deter any aggression from any direction. The Minister, Abraham Belay, made remarks during the celebration of the annual Defense Day. Presenting a paper for panel discussion at the event, a seasoned historian, Ababaw Ayalo, indicated the establishment of the Ethiopian army has direct link to the state formation. Daniel Kasaon has more on that.
The Ethiopian Defense Force, which consists mainly the ground and air force, is well known in the African continent and the world at large due to its track record in the continent and across the world with peacekeeping missions. The National Defense Forces Day is being marked by undergoing various activities that include panel discussion and opening exhibitions, among others. Expressing its current status, the Minister of Defense, Dr. Abraham Belay, expressed confidence that the Ethiopian army is currently in a good shape to deter any aggression from any direction.
ጀግና ጠንካራ ዲሲፕሊን የተከበረ ወታደር ያላት ሀገር ነች።
Now we are creating efficient and unique feature of the Ethiopian army with strict leadership and discipline. Our enemies will not get a chance to attack us since we are now many steps ahead of them. We are well equipped. Now we have the required human power, organizational structure, skills and capabilities. We need to maintain this status in a better manner.
Presenting paper for discussion, Assistant Professor Ababaw Ayalo indicated the establishment of the Ethiopian army has direct link to the establishment of Ethiopia as a country.
The history of the Ethiopian army is directly linked with the formation of Ethiopia and its formal government. The origins and military traditions date back to the earliest history of Ethiopia. A nation and a government can't exist without realization of an army. We need to pay attention to the military force. When we remember the Battle of Adwa, it was history and a making due to the engagement of Ethiopian troops.
This year's celebration has seen the launch of a book entitled Ring of Fire, which depicts the real picture of the Ethiopian army. The celebration has brought together former President of Ethiopia and other dignitaries to uphold its outstanding deeds for Ethiopia's sovereignty, peace, stability, and territorial integrity.
Moving on, Ethiopia is expressing resolve to start exporting wheat soon, and this endeavor is expected to help ensure food security. Ethiopia made the remark during the launching ceremony of the National Summer Wheat Production Activities of the 2015 Ethiopian fiscal year in the Somali region. To shed more light on this, I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Demis Canelo, who is an economist by profession. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
So some countries such as Djibouti have already gone to the extent of expressing interest to be the first country, to welcome wheat exportation from Ethiopia. What's the multiple meaning of this?
Well, the multiple meaning of this is that Ethiopia is showing its potentials, coming to a realization and creating influences not only to neighboring countries but all over the world. Rest assured, once we made sure that we can export to neighboring countries, requests will come from Europe, Middle East, and the rest of the world. Because wheat is becoming a very precious, commodity for various reasons, and Ethiopia is a country which has huge potential to do so. So if you work hard, why not actually making wheat one of the major foreign exchange earning commodity for the country? Yes,
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is good news for Ethiopia, especially.
Of course.
So the nation is also gearing up towards welcoming foreign banks into the economy. Let's also talk about foreign currency and other related issues, sir, as far as this new announcement is concerned. What's your take on that?
Well, I have been asked repeatedly on this issue, and my response, had it been about 18 years ago when we had a debate whether foreign banks have to come to the country or not, At that time, I was arguing, no, it was not the time to bring in foreign banks, because our private banks, other than the Central Bank of Ethiopia, Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, were still at the infant stage, and they were not actually getting good pick in terms of how to do business in the finance industry. And secondly, our private sector was also not that much aligned in terms of how to use the banking system for further investment and sustainable change-bringing, undertakings in this country. I'm sure we have had a good time, both for the banks and for the private sector, to learn and bring their competence in the area. And I think it is timely for us to have foreign banks coming in, and also our bankers to become competitive enough so that they can make a difference by providing different products, financial products for investors, as well as actually going to the grassroots level and really harnessing what should be harnessed from the majority of difference-making farmers of the country.
So do you believe that it's long overdue?
Of course. Well, it's not long overdue. As I said, had it been 5-6 years ago, maybe still I might have some reservation. But if you ask me today, it is the right time to bring them.
Dr. Thomas, thank you so much for your ideas.
Thank you.
Moving on, Ethiopia's ambassador to Pakistan says the conflict in the north was sparked by the TPLF's unquenchable thirst for power. While Ethiopia and Ethiopians demand equality, the TPLF wanted to control all of the resources of the country, the ambassador pointed out. The remark came when the ambassador talked to PTV World, a Pakistani mainstream media. Guya Hinseni has the following account.
Human rights and international law are being used as instruments to unduly intervene in other countries' international affairs, according to the ambassador. The West has failed to grasp the reality in Ethiopia, he said, adding, the TPLF want to recapture federal power and restore its undeserved monopoly.
Look, thank you very much for raising this basic issue. What is the major problem Ethiopia we have? Previously TPLF, Tigray Liberation Front, which was, they are ruling Ethiopia close to 30 years. Through controlling the military, economy, cultural supremacy. Change comes in 1960, in 2060, where people, like intellectuals, come on guys, we are now in a civilized, we believe in equality, let us share equal power. That is where came the reformist, within our country comes. That reformist has ensured changes that is, driven within the party.
True.
Plus again owned by the people. That is where the marriage of convenience came. The people take, TPLF, enough is enough. Now let us live in peace.
True.
This is what we're promoting. But the TPLF, they resisted this. They wanted that supremacy. But Ethiopian people says, take your share. Let us share what we have. Manage your own affair in Tigray. And the central politics, let us share equally. They said, we can't, no. We will not. So our Prime Minister has led this change. He has did a fundamental changes addressed in Ethiopia, which was deep-rooted
True.
the political issues. Look, people like me previously were outside the political context. He brought us on front. And let's say we own Ethiopians, belongs to all Ethiopians,
True.
and let us work together for the, prosperity, the unity of Ethiopia. That is where it is. The policy he designed, basically, we have a clear vision where we are heading. We use something we learned from history, something that is around us, so we are connecting history with the future.
Regarding the assistance he delivered to more than 8,000 flood-affected people in the 10th city of Sindh, Bakar said climate resistance is a just call to the international community for a cleaner and safer environment.
Minister and Foreign Minister, he was addressing General Assembly of this year in September. He said, we need to call for transformations and availability of finance for climate resilience.
True.
This is one thing, the only way that justice will come. We are not requesting help us.
True.
This is the compensation, as you said. They have did, to advance their, national interest, they destroyed the planet all we share.
True.
We need to recover. This planet has to be restored. Resiliency should be there. We're requesting the finance that required to rebuild this country. Also help, others. Pakistan is a good example where it has suffered. It became a basketball for climate, fiasco.
Over 33 million people have been affected in 116 of the country's 160 districts. Over 993,000 homes, 157 bridges, and over 3,500 kilometers of roads have been damaged, and over 700,000 livestock have been lost. Ambassador Bakr handed over essential food items, medicines, shelters, water, biscuit, and toys to more than 8,000 flood-affected people in the 10th city of Sed. He underscored that Ethiopia stands in solidarity with government of Pakistan and will continue to help it recover.
Well, dear viewers, now let's turn our attention to trending stories over the past 24 hours, and I'm joined by my colleague Goshu Malso. He's going to help us find some of the things that he found out over the past 24 hours. Goshu, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Shfei.
So we're hearing that Ethiopia is about to export wheat to foreign countries, which is really good news. What have you observed in this regard?
Yeah, Ethiopia is striving to produce goods in the country or domestically and to secure foreign currency, particularly in wheat production or import substitution in wheat production. So Ethiopia is in the pipeline to export wheat. So it is projected that 152 million quintals of wheat would be produced in the Maher season or in the coming harvesting season. So following this, Djibouti expressed its desire to import wheat from Ethiopia. This is a good news, and
Exactly.
This is also, Djibouti will be also the first country to import wheat from Ethiopia. So its agriculture minister, Mohammed Ahmed, said Djibouti will be the first country to import wheat from Ethiopia. So Ethiopia and Djibouti enjoying the long-standing relationship in different sectors. For example, they have strong cooperation in infrastructure, in green legacy, and international forums. So in Ethiopia, the railways, for example, is an exemplary, and in renewable energy and infrastructure, as I told you in the beginning. So Ethiopia, railway, renewable energy, these are integrated Ethiopia and Djibouti in the Eastern Africa. He also mentioned that recently Ethiopia has donated seedlings for forestry and food as part of its green legacy initiative with view to ensuring food security and tackle climate change. The relationship between the two countries, especially in cross-border agriculture development, it's beyond that. So Ethiopia is carrying out various activities to create regional economic integration and realize a strong government with Djibouti. So the country is doing successful works in summer and irrigated with cultivation of production. The region can overcome the food insecurity challenges by doing so or get rid of aid dependency. So Ethiopia has large extensive lands, arable lands. So if we exhaustively use those potentials, we can extricate or we can get out of dependency and importing wheat from abroad. So this is very important move that should be strengthened. And the wheat import substitution is the grand initiative that is one of the grand initiative by the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is bearing fruit if we export coffee, wheat to Djibouti, and Djibouti will be the first country to import wheat from Ethiopia. So we should strengthen this, and if we ensure all these things, we can extricate from poverty and dependency. If you remember last time, during the recent visit of Kenyan President William Ruto, the new president, the Ethiopia and Kenya have agreed to export coffee, wheat to Kenya. So this is all from me, Shifi.
Yeah, thank you, Goshu. This is definitely going to beef up the bilateral ties between Ethiopia and Djibouti and others, of course. Thank you, Goshu.
That's great. Thank you.
እኔ ያለሁላት ኢትዮጵያ አትፈርስም እኔ ያለሁላት ሀገር አትፈርስም እኛ ያለንላት ኢትዮጵያ አትፈርስም እኛ ያለንላት ኢትዮጵያ አትፈርስም
Welcome back. Pakistani ambassador to Ethiopia says Ethiopia is a sovereign, independent founding member of the UN with all its rights and international obligations. The ambassador told ETV that this ancient nation should be left alone to handle its problems by itself. Kasaun Chane has more.
Since the start of the TPLF provoked war into the northern part of the country, Ethiopians residing at home and abroad have been playing a significant role in fending off the unprecedented intra-group pressure and interference. Since the dawn of history, some foreign entities have been working round the clock, intending to undermine the nation's sovereignty under the pretense of a wide spectrum of lame reasons that do not reflect the existing situations on the ground. Ethiopia has every right to undermine the destiny of its people in the battle against poverty and neo-colonialism. The country has repeatedly demonstrated that it stands for peace and development, but would never accept any level of negative portrayal by any foreign entities. As the Pakistani ambassador to Ethiopia, Shahzad Abbas, his government would never accept undue interference in the domestic affairs of Ethiopia, and express his firm belief in Ethiopia's capacity to solve its problems through its initiative as a sovereign country.
All sovereign nations, developed or developing, both have been facing various types of pressures from inside and outside. So these two issues, one is the ethnic issue of your country, which needs to be reviewed from another angle, and I think that the Constitution of Ethiopia, although gives ample opportunity to each federating unit to work according to their own aspirations, but the territorial integrity is the fundamental question. So if anybody is going for the separation, then he has to follow the Constitution. Or if you want that the people should come together, I think that is the best way out.
The ambassador reaffirmed that Pakistani will always stand in support of Ethiopia's solidarity for peace, stability, security, and territorial integrity and development, but noted that Ethiopians do not have a tradition of bowing to foreign forces, and history is a witness to this fact.
I believe that sovereignty is the most endeared question to any independent nation. Ethiopia is proud of its independence, is proud of its history. It has never been colonized by any colonizer in the world. So I would say that sovereignty and territorial integrity are the two questions which are most important. And no country, and especially a country like Ethiopia, would sacrifice its independence. So all pressures which are coming from here and there are just pressures in air. I believe that the resilience and the force in Ethiopian people would not accept it. So you should proud of your tradition, you should proud of your culture and heritage, that your country has never been succumbed to such pressures. And I hope that all these pressures which are mounting up against question of Ethiopian sovereignty would not be entertained by the people of Ethiopia.
He further underscored that the freedom of Africans should be respected, that they can solve problems in Africa by themselves, appreciating Ethiopia's move for an everlasting peace process led by the AU.
And the African Union, under the leadership of former Nigerian President Obasanjo, has been working quite along. And I heard that today the meeting is going on in South Africa. So I hope with this flexible timetable and format and location, the government of Ethiopia, with its adversaries in this particular issue, would be able to find out a compromised solution where the life and property of the Ethiopian people would be protected.
Ethiopians have spoken loud and clear that their sovereignty and territorial integrity is not for sale or the subject of any form of concession. The people of Tigray are Ethiopians and are both being treated as such, while the terrorist TPLF is the enemy of both the Tigray people and Ethiopians in general, and any foreign force that allies itself with this terrorist force should know this.
Now, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has called on the United Nations for inclusive, fair, effective and representative multilateralism to better respond to humanity's most pressing challenges. In a statement it issued, the ministry recalled that as a founding member of the United Nations, Ethiopia has remained committed to the principles of the United Nations Charter. Recalling that the nation has demonstrated its contribution to global peace and collective security, the statement went on to say that Ethiopian men and women have continued to play a robust role from the early days of UN peacekeeping missions in the 1950s. Ethiopia is proud and privileged to have hosted the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa for over 60 years, it added. Ethiopia, while celebrating multilateralism anchored on the UN Charter and its cardinal principles, calls for a reformed, efficient and viable United Nations fit for purpose in the 21st century. That's according to the statement. Ethiopia's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations, Taye Asqaselazi, gave briefings on latest developments in Ethiopia in the past days. During his briefing, the ambassador underlined the commitment of the government of Ethiopia to the protection of civilians and delivery of humanitarian assistance to people in need in the northern parts of the country. He called on council members to avoid steps that may cast doubt on the AU-led peace process. Regarding the defensive measures being taken by the Ethiopian National Defense Force, Ambassador Taye underscored that the government security forces have the right to station and operate from any part of the country, including Tigray. Ethiopia is always committed to the AU-led peace process, Ambassador Taye noted, calling on the council members to support the efforts underway to resolve the conflict in the north peacefully.
እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ። ማጎ ብሔራዊ ፓርክ በጣም በተፈጥሮ ጸጋ ውብ የሆነችና በተራሮች የተከበበች መሃላ እንዲሁም ታንዛኒያ ግሮንጎሮ የምትባል የኢኮሎጂ ጥበቃ ቦታን የምትመስል ነው መሃላ። ይሄ ውስጥ በዚህ ብሔራዊ ፓርክ ውስጥ እንግዲህ በኢትዮጵያ ካሉት አንጋፋ የተባለ ከፍተኛ ገቢ የሚሰበስብ እስከ 2.4 ሚሊዮን በአመት ገቢ የሚሰበስብ የቱሪስት መስህብ ዙሪያው በባህላዊ የታጀበ ማህበረሰብን ያቀፈ ነው።
ዓመት አካባቢ ወደ 81 አካባቢ አጥቢ የዱር እንስሳት ዝርያዎች ነበሩ። ከነዛ ውስጥ ትላልቅ አጥቢ የዱር እንስሳት የሚባሉት ጎሽ፣ ዝሆን፣ ዲፋርሳ፣ ሌላ እነዚህ ስጋ በል የሆኑት አንበሳ፣ ነብር የመሳሰሉት አሉ። አሁን ላይ ከነዚህ ውስጥ የተወሰነ የዱር እንስሳት ዝርያዎች በተለያየ ምክንያት በዚህ ብሔራዊ ፓርኩ ጠፍተዋል።
Now, while Ethiopians and friends of Ethiopia are standing in unison in denouncing undue foreign meddling in the internal affairs, a Danish journalist says these initiatives help in pressuring the West toward fairness. Talking to ETV, the journalist Rasmus Sanaris calls upon Western journalists to report on Ethiopian stories in an accurate and fair manner. Daniel Kassaun has more on that.
Ethiopians and friends of Ethiopia are denouncing some Western countries' interventions across the globe concerning the conflict with the TPLF, Talking to ETV, Danish journalist Rasmus Sonneres said rallies staging across the globe are key to change mindsets of the West with positive messages.
So I participated in one of those rallies last November in Copenhagen. So, and I find that when we speak to the Western public, we can change minds with positive messaging, like support our democracy, respect our constitutional order, let our own newly independent human rights organizations do their work, free Tigray from the TPLF. Those kind of messages work very well.
Regarding Western interferences on Ethiopia, the journalist said some individuals who are close to TPLF may need the group to come to power. Otherwise, the rest, including the United States, are beginning to realize the chaos TPLF caused and unpopular extremism in both sides. But the problem is the wrong diagnosis they have what this conflict is about.
I think the U.S. is finally beginning to realize that all they're gaining from this both sidism is becoming extremely unpopular. They're not even popular with the TPLF, right? They've just become unpopular all over the Horn of Africa. And I think also the Western diplomats, when they spend time in Ethiopia, they talk to a lot of Ethiopians, they start to take on the Ethiopian perspective. So, because Western governments, they don't want 120 million refugees, they want stability. Almost all people see themselves as good. I've worked a lot in development aid. They may be misguided in many ways, but they don't want Ethiopians to suffer. They want progress, democracy, human rights. The same thing as the Ethiopians that are my friends, the same Western ideals that Ethiopians share with most Westerners. So the problem is they have a wrong diagnosis of what this conflict is about. They're seeing it through a prejudiced lens, the infamous toxic white savior complex, that makes them think they're morally superior.
The journalist finally calls on Western reporters to cover issues on the ground about Ethiopia.
I would say, take a fresher look at Ethiopia and Africa, instead of always assuming the worst, instead of the same lazy comparison with Rwanda. Immerse yourself into the Ethiopian society if you have the possibility. Nowadays, you can even use Google Translate to read local newspapers. Nobody does that.
Right.
And do not assume that these self-proclaimed experts are neutral. People like Kjetil Kronwall, Martin Plo, Alex de Waal, who've stood ready to meet the demand for media sensationalism, and they have, boosted the false TPLF narrative about the dictatorial old guard being somehow representatives of an oppressed minority. But they've been wrong again and again in all their predictions. Like 1 year ago, Alex de Waal was predicting the breakup of Ethiopia becoming like a loose confederation. Now he's predicting state failure. And all I have to say about this is I think it's very unlikely that Ethiopia will break up and have state failure. But if that were to happen, the Western powers would have a lot of blame.
Now moving to continental news, winemaking was a profession most South African parents could never have envisioned for their children. But Black South Africans are managing to break through multiple barriers into the renowned industry, transforming a landscape that was historically white. We'll have more on that from Africa News.
Paul Shigalan speaks his flowering grape crop in Franschhoek, a town located in South Africa region dotted with centuries-old vineyards. A 41-year-old bought Klein Gordast farm after saving up for 15 years to achieve a dream of his. His mother had for 37 years worked at a farm in South Africa, Cape Wineland, under the white minority apartheid regime. Zikopa's fate was not a preordained destiny.
If you grow up on a farm as children of farm laborers, black farm laborers, you are raised to be the next crop of labor for that farmer. The farmer doesn't look very far for labor. The children of the laborers that he have, in most cases, become the next generation of labor.
The first vineyards were established in the 1600s by white French Huguenots. Since then, land has passed down through generations, and when sales do occur, it has often been to neighbors.
If we want to see change in an industry, we need to be that change. And I wanted to contribute to the change into an industry that I love dearly, which is the wine industry.
Carmen Steve became South Africa's first fully black-owned winery in 2011, and its big challenge remains.
Investment-wise, it's a big challenge, and partly that is partly why I think there is not a lot of black stakeholders, because we don't come from a background where we have the financial backing.
This year, Carmen Steve took home 3 gold medals at South Africa Wine and Spirit Award event. But like many black-owned brands, she produces her grapes from farmers in the region, not yet having her own land to cultivate.
Finally, a quick recap of the top stories. National Army praised as Ethiopia's lifeline.